Hello, my name is Appoh, and today we're going to be discussing the Great Axe nerfs and mainly the updated Bruiser build. So this video is basically going to be a build guide. We're going to be going over all the abilities, what you're going to be looking for, and your perks, masteries, stuff like that. I'm explaining a little bit. I'm going to try and keep it brief. I think a lot of you guys already understand this build. I'm not going to go too in depth, but I'm definitely going to be talking about a lot of points here. So first we're just going to be talking about the Great Axe and the Masteries here. This is what I pick up whenever I use the Great Axe in a war. So we're going to be picking up a lot of these perks here just to increase our crits, and we're going to be mainly focusing on trying to get keen and vicious on our weapon in order to empower these crits. There are some other perks that you could pick up. A lot of this is just personal preference. I've seen a lot of variations of this. This just so happens to be the way that I use it. I don't pick up any of the upgrades as I find the damage increase here from 120 to 140 just isn't enough. And then this I find is very difficult to land. And also the damage isn't as insane as you might want it to be. You can totally do a full Reaper where you're picking up essentially the same perks, but you're picking up all the like this, and fully upgrading this in order to try and utilize this a bit more. We're not going to be left click spamming as much, so trying to use the charge for a bit more damage could actually be a more viable approach. Next, we're going to be on the Mauler side. I pick up all of the Maelstrom. I find Maelstrom is extremely good. You have this essentially what we refer to as the blender. We basically throw a lot of our bruisers onto a point in a war, and we just be like blender, 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 and that just means everyone just Maelstrom. The Maelstrom is insane, does some insane AoE damage. Since it's pulling in targets, you essentially pull in people closer and closer to the center, and since more people are going to be on it, you're just blending all them up, doing massive damage. And this is how we nuke a lot of sites. It also applies weaken if you have the mod, which is something you definitely need. Yeah, cannot underestimate how strong Maelstrom is. The Gravity Well I fully upgrade. A lot of people end up not fully upgrading it in order to pick up other perks. Personally, I just like the Unyielding here, and I pick up a lot of these perks in order to get to Mauler's Fury. I personally use Mauler's Fury over Bloodlust. Bloodlust did get a bit of a nerf, and I do find that this is very easy to get to max 10 stacks, so you essentially are getting a 30% damage increase when you're attacking. So if you use Maelstrom, Gravity Well on a point, you're hitting a bunch of people. Every person you hit applies another stack. It's not like every time you hit, if it hits multiple people, it applies one stack. No, it applies one stack for every person you hit, so you can get 30% very, very quick. Very strong. This is how I spec my Warhammer. A lot of people drop clear out for this, especially if you get the upgrade. You end up getting a bit more damage out of this. Penetrates armor when you have the upgrade. You get a bit more of a selfish fortify, very strong one, 7 seconds at 20%. I prefer the AoE defense bonus that gives a bunch of your allies a 10% defense bonus for 4 seconds, so a weaker defense that does more people, whereas this is a more selfish defense. It is totally up to personal preference. If you're going for backline killing, I would go for a Wrecking Ball over Clear Out. I play a bit more point and I play a bit more AoE, so this is how I do it. I like getting Aftershock, so I'm pushing a lot of perks in order to push there. I don't pick up any of these like haste perks. I just find that when I'm on the Warhammer, I'm not trying to run around. I'm mainly just throwing all my abilities and I switch back to the Great Axe. This is mainly my experience from Kalaris using it. I've used it a bit here and there, but it's not really a build that I really touch too much anymore. There's tons of bruisers in our company that do fantastic, picking up Armor Breaker and Wrecking Ball. You can pick up both of these with Sundering Shockwave. That perk there, reducing the target's damage absorption. Applying a rend with a Shockwave is insane, so you always need that. This is honestly extremely good, especially when you get the Leeching Path of Destiny comboed with the Prevailing Spirit. You can get a lot of health back with this. So these two perks are extremely useful, and then you can throw in whatever you want from there. You can drop the Path of Destiny for this and this. You could drop this for this and this. You can totally mess around with all these in order to find something that you really like. You can drop the Aftershock in order to dip more into the Juggernaut tree as well. So next we're going to be going over the armor. For me, I like to run the medium set. You can totally do heavy if you want. Light is not really that viable when it comes to wars. However, feel free to do this if you'd like. I've seen some full strength light players that do some insane damage and do really, really well. Not in my server, but I've seen some videos, so I'm not too sure if it's about player skill. But in general, I think medium is the way to go. If you time your hops really well, you can survive much longer than you can in heavy, where you're very slow and you get knocked. You get CC'd, you get knocked down, and then it's extremely hard to get out of there. So medium just feels a little bit better. Personally, I use a lot of onyx stones, and diamonds I feel very good. Gambit on both. You can also use malachite on the warhammer. I think malachite might actually be a little bit better on the warhammer than Gambit. However, I've seen both. As long as you're dodging before your abilities, you can get that 3% extra damage bonus. However, since you're basically throwing slows all the time, you do get that damage bonus all of the time rather than some of the time. So I would say Cruel is probably the way to go. Now for the perk mods that you're going to want to pick up Repulse and Clear Out if you're using it and you want to use that effect. It pushes people quite far away, so if you want to keep them close, don't pick it up. I personally don't pick it up, but it is good if you're just trying to get people off the point. Leeching Path of Destiny, I've mentioned it multiple times, extremely useful. Penetrating Wrecking Ball if you're going to be using that. I would recommend avoiding Mighty Gavel. You can try it out if you like it. However, I do feel like it's just not as viable as a lot of the other abilities. Empowering Armor Breaker has the situations where it can be extremely viable. So if you do want to throw it on a piece of armor, it's not too bad if you are rocking it. And the Sundering Shockwave is a must-have. Now for the Great Axe, you're definitely going to want to be getting the Maelstrom perk. The Maelstrom perk is going to give you a weakening on all of the enemies, which is extremely useful, especially in these blender calls. Then you also have the Insatiable Gravity Well, which is going to give you that extra damage. It's going to give you health back, and in general, just going to be extremely, extremely useful. If you want to pick up the Charge perk, you can. However, I find I never really get to trigger, or if I do, it's once or twice in a war. Totally up to you. I would opt against it and just go for a Resilient perk. For the jewelry, you're going to be wanting to pick up Health, Divine, and the the Fortify that lasts longer on the amulet. There is a Bis amulet called the Infinity Stone that you can get just by doing the quest. It is 23 strength, basically exactly what you want for a bruiser. If you find something better, definitely go for it, but that is essentially Bis. The ring, you're going to want Keen Awareness, Hardy, or Leeching. All those are pretty good. I would always have the Keen Awareness. Hardy feels extremely good. Just having the extra little hop makes the world of a difference in a lot of situations. Leeching, I feel like since the buff has actually been super viable, especially with the Great Axe. Next, on the earring, you're going to want Refreshing Toast, Regenerating, Nimble, and Refreshing. Any of those are good. Try and get a mix of them. Refreshing Toast is probably the most important one to have, simply because in the middle of wars you're going to be popping tons of health pots since you're our frontline. So you're going to want to make sure that cooldown is up as much as you can. Now the goal as a bruiser is to be a frontline. You're going to kill all these clumps of enemies. You're going to CC all the important targets with your Gravity Well. You're going to mass AoE on point, so there's going to be calls for blenders, there's going to be calls for AoEs, Gravity Wells, Maelstroms on point. That's when you want to just jump in there and just start doing a bunch of your AoE. Now when it comes to your counters, you're going to be running into a lot of Dex players. Dex players can infinitely kite you, and they can do really big damage from far away. It's extremely hard to beat them. Mages also do some insane stuff with their CC from the Ice Gauntlet. So those are kind of what to look out for. If you're chasing them in a war and you're not able to catch them after your first couple of CCs, just run away. Don't over chase. Don't be greedy because they will take you out and they will infinitely kite you. You're definitely going to want to be focusing on the AoE clumps. There's going to be times where you see a bunch of them. Throw your Gravity Well, make a call out to your teammate, and make sure that everybody's following up on it. We usually have a shot caller that's a bruiser, and he will throw Gravity Wells, and then everyone will follow up on it, and we can kill massive clumps of people very, very quickly. So the conclusion I have is that Bruiser class is still essential more. Yes, it got nerfed. The Great Axe got nerfed. There's a lot less left-click spamming. But in general, it is still extremely viable for wars. The Maelstrom brings so much utility that it's very, very hard to drop it. The Gravity Well is also something that like is essential to wars at this point, that I just don't see a world where you remove it. And in general, I think it's probably one of the more well-rounded sort of melee classes that's out there. Obviously it has its faults versus a lot of ranged players like Dex and Mages, but it's still going to be needed in wars. And I mainly focus around talking about wars just because that's pretty much all that matters right now in the game until they add an arenas or some sort of like coordinated duel session. It's not really going to be anything I focus on. Wars are kind of the bread and butter of the PvP in this game. So yeah, thank you for listening. Bye.